Hi, I'm Meg Disler, Executive Director of the St. Joe Community Health Foundation. Thank you for joining us for this overview of a training opportunity for implicit or unconscious bias. This is an important topic for us as a ministry of the poor handmaids of Jesus Christ, because we believe every human life is sacred through all stages of existence, from conception to death. And we believe each person deserves respect and affirmation, regardless of race, creed, sex, age, sexual orientation, status, or ability. We believe each person has rights and responsibilities and must be respected and treated fairly. And yet there's a lot of data out there that shows this isn't always happening with the 5,000 plus births in our community each year. The Indiana State Department of Health reports that in 2018, Black infants in Northeast Indiana were 2.2 times more likely to die before their first birthday than white infants. Black mothers had the highest rate of pregnancy-related mortality at 37 deaths per 100,000 live births in Indiana, compared to a national rate of 16.9. Indiana State Department of Health has been tracking these numbers, and particularly the maternal mortality rates are getting worse. The American Academy of OBGYNs and over 30 different studies have shown one of the biggest causes of this disparity is unconscious bias or implicit bias. What we are pleased to be offering as part of the St. Joe Community Health Foundation is this great training opportunity for healthcare providers or anyone working with pregnant women, infants, to really learn how to strengthen their own skills so that we address this unconscious bias and help more mothers and babies have great beginnings. I'm also pleased to introduce an excellent training opportunity for which the St. Joe Foundation will provide scholarships. The March of Dimes has an online virtual training called Breaking Through Bias in Maternity Care. Ariane Graham is with us to share the details of that training.
Thanks for letting us join you today. I'm also joined by Ronnie Jenkins, who is our designated Director of Implicit Bias Training. So those of you who have worked with Gina and with March of Dimes may be aware that a lot of what we do is professional education related to the care of moms and babies. But we're really pleased to present our latest offering out of our professional education series, which is called Breaking Through Implicit Bias in Maternal Health Care. And the objective of this training really is to raise awareness. I think Janelle really helpfully pointed out that awareness is just the first step. We have to all be on the same page about the facts and understand how biases play out in the way we deliver care and how they've affected the maternal infant health crisis to date. And then we have more work to do when it comes to equity and inclusion, and not just treating everyone equally, but treating everyone equitably. We know that to reach clinicians at scale with this really important information, as they're moving between clinical schedules, as they're taking a break to eat, we also want to offer them what we call an individualized learning experience, or the e-learning that you all have access to, thanks to the generous contribution of the foundation. And so I'm going to show you a little sort of sneak peek of what that looks like. The whole e-learning individual experience is about an hour, but I'm just going to show you a few minutes because, even as Janelle said, I could sit here and talk to you about it all day, but I'm going to make it real for you so you can really understand sort of what we're trying to get across. So I'll just show a little bit of that from my screen. Make sure I share the sound. And this is the introduction. The full training has a couple of modules. So an introduction to implicit bias, how it played out in maternal health care. What is implicit bias? How does it work? An overview of structural racism in the United States. And finally, strategies to remedy that bias and how to be an equity champion in your community.
Hello, and welcome to Breaking Through Bias in Maternal Healthcare, presented by the March of Dimes and Quality Interactions. To begin, click Start Course. There's an epidemic in our nation, an epidemic that preys on some of the most vulnerable members of our society, mothers and babies, and especially mothers and babies of color. Black and Native American and Alaska Native women are dying at a much higher rate from pregnancy-related causes than white, Hispanic, and Asian Pacific Islander women. According to research and analysis by the CDC and others, racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare account for a significant number of these deaths. In other words, these deaths are preventable. Better outcomes for all mothers and babies require all of us to work to eliminate these disparities. In this training, you'll learn to recognize implicit bias in yourself and others, and by exploring strategies you can use with the patients you interact with, and strategies that you can advocate for, implement, and support in the institutions where you work. When you complete this course, you will have tools to help you explain implicit bias, including its cognitive basis and potential impact on maternal care, to describe how structural racism in the U.S. contributes to implicit bias in maternal care, and to use ally model strategies in patient interactions to avoid implicit bias, to apply an equity lens that takes into consideration patient needs when making decisions. Let's get started. To begin Lesson 1, click Next.
If you aren't aware, all of our professional education titles are eligible for both for continuing education credits for physicians and nurses. If you have additional designations that need continuing ed credits, just get in touch with us. We can definitely help you on that front.
Before we explore the maternal death statistics for women of color, let's consider just one story of preventable maternal death, that of Shalon Irving. Shalon Irving was a CDC epidemiologist and lieutenant commander in the U.S. Public Health Service. She had a dual subject PhD and was researching structural inequality. Shalon was also a new mother. In the weeks after her daughter's birth, Shalon was very much aware that something was not right. Among other symptoms, she had elevated blood pressure, postpartum weight gain, and significant swelling in her legs. Despite her pain and exhaustion, Shalon made 4 visits to her healthcare provider and was seen twice at home by a visiting nurse. But her concerns were attributed to having just given birth. 3 weeks postpartum, Shalon collapsed and died. Her autopsy revealed heart damage consistent with hypertension and attributed her death to complications from high blood pressure. Recent CDC data indicates more than half of maternal deaths occur postpartum, and a number of factors put Black mothers at greater risk during this period. Would systemic changes have saved Shalon's life? Yes, but what is striking about Shalon's case is how many care providers dismissed her concerns in 6 post-delivery encounters. Shalon was highly educated, lived in an affluent neighborhood, and had access to quality health care. She was an expert in the very healthcare disparities that she tragically came to represent.
At various points during the training, learners are able to click this purple citation button and see the underlying data that informs what we're showing.
The number of pregnancy-related deaths has more than doubled in the past 25 years, from 7.2 per 100,000 live births in 1987 to 17.2 deaths per 100,000 live births in 2015. This stark reality puts the U.S. last among developed nations in protecting the lives of new mothers. The racial disparities within this statistic are startling. Recent data shows that nationally, Black women have maternal death rates over 3 times that of white women, and American Indian and Alaskan Native women experience maternal death rates more than twice that of white women. When near misses or significant pregnancy-related health events that don't end in maternal death are considered, the magnitude of these statistics for women of color is staggering. Shalon Irving's case illustrates the disturbing reality that even the most highly educated Black women face disproportionate risk in maternal care. Can this disparity be explained by factors such as education, obesity, or income? While social determinants of health like these all contribute to health outcomes, the racial disparity seen in maternal care cannot be explained by these factors alone. Recent data reveals that education doesn't explain the disparity. College-educated Black mothers are more at risk than women of all other races who never finished high school. Among women with at least a college degree, the pregnancy-related mortality rate for Black women is 5 times higher than that of white women. Obesity is a known risk factor for chronic illnesses that can contribute to pregnancy-related complications. However, regional studies have found that these obese women of all other races experience fewer mortalities than Black women who are not overweight. Black women with high incomes are more at risk than women of all other races who have low incomes. Income lowers the pregnancy-related mortality ratio at greater rates for white women than Black women. As we consider data and stories about disparities in healthcare, we must realize that we are not looking at disparities in health, but rather at disparities in the health care that we as providers deliver. Our healthcare system should ensure that all patients receive equitable care that is responsive to the patient's needs, with the goal of ensuring their safety, well-being, and positive outcomes. However, acknowledging that disparities in healthcare exist can lead to uncomfortable discussions and self-examination. Most healthcare providers say they treat all their patients the same. When it comes to disparity, this attitude is known as the "not me" phenomenon. Every care provider wants to believe that while disparities exist in the system overall, he or she doesn't personally contribute to these disparities. Most of us intend to do right by the people we serve. The data increasingly shows that equal treatment is not what patients of color experience. The Giving Voice to Mothers study, conducted by non-government organizations, healthcare providers, and researchers in partnership with service users, provides evidence of this reality. The study examined mistreatment in maternity care that can adversely impact quality and safety. Mistreatment included physical, sexual, and verbal abuse, stigma and discrimination, failure to meet professional standards of care, poor rapport between women and providers, and poor conditions and constraints presented by the health system. The study qualified mistreatment by race, socio-demographics, mode of birth, place of birth, and context of care to describe the intersectional relationships between these variables. In short, the study found that mistreatment rates for women of color were consistently higher even when examining interaction between race and other maternal characteristics. Unsurprisingly, the Giving Voice to Mothers findings are supported by the larger body of research. Among the first to find disparities in care, this 2003 study, published in the American Journal of Public Health, reviewed over 30 studies that found provider contributions to racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. The researchers found that providers had lower expectations for minority patients, spent less effort communicating with minority patients, and assumed the role of gatekeeper for treatment. In short, the study concluded that the potential influence of provider communications on help seekers' health-related cognition and behavior has been well documented. As providers, we want the best for our patients, but in spite of this, it's clear that racial disparities in patient experience and outcomes do exist. As we strive to improve care for all populations, we must look for the answer to this question. What explains the disconnect between our intentions and the reality of disparity? Part of the answer lies in social cognition, the cognitive processes that goes on behind the scenes and that lead to implicit bias in our clinical decision-making. The next lesson looks at how our brains work and how we're affected by stereotypes that shape implicit bias, even without our being aware of it. Before you go to the next lesson, consider the following scenarios. As you answer them, think about what you learned about implicit bias in healthcare in this lesson.
The end of every learning module also has a knowledge check for the learner to assess their comprehension of the content. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with the story of the Isaac family.
We had a great pregnancy. Jace was an amazing child to carry. In May of 2018, everything changed.
Because once we read through the medical report, it was like, man, you guys could have caught it at this stage. You could have caught it at that stage. She had a lot of protein in her urine. They knew he was measuring small. He failed the stress test. So there was several stop signs that they ran through.
It literally keeps me up at night most of the time. And this is part of the reason why we decided to even share our story. Just a simple fact that we had no idea. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. We waited until we got married. We waited until we were like at the point of, we were both ready to have a child. And just because of somebody's viewpoint on how certain people act, or just carelessness or bias, our story didn't turn out the way it was supposed to. And it kills me that it happens all the time. I didn't know that I should have been cautious because I was Black. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't looking for certain things because I didn't feel like there was a problem. And I think that's part of the problem. So I wasn't aware that I needed to be aware of any type of bias whatsoever, because I felt like, as an educated Black woman with insurance, I should get treated like anybody else. I feel like people shouldn't have to go through this, no matter what color they are, but especially Black women, because we already suffer so much being Black in America that this is just one more thing.
I guess I would want the providers to know that, you're not just treating one person, but you're treating a community. You're treating a family.